Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning back in once again to Queen Ahmadiyyah TV presents Beyond the Realm. So as you're coming in, please feel free to go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. Be sure to click the notification bell and click the word all so that you're notified each time that I go live. Also, don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Queen Ahmadiyyah and also on Instagram at divine underscore goddess underscore 27, on Twitter at dgoddess27, Brighton and Patreon at Queen Ahmadiyyah. Okay? Okay. Judah Queen says, I love the countdown. I get so excited. Thank you, beloved. Oh, Erie Blackfire says, love you. And I love you right, Black, beloved. Okay? Hello, Michael M. Thank you for your kind words. General Louverture, hello. Ade Dembella, give me the power. I beg of you. I love it. Okay, so let's get started, people. Here we go with another paranormal story for you. So tonight I'm going to be telling you the story that many of you probably didn't even know came from an actual event. The story about Child's Play, the doll Chucky that was possessed, right? Well, that actually came from a real story. Hello, Dervis. Thank you for your kind words, beloved. So this actually came from a real story. Hello, Howard. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it, people. Robert the Doll, the story of Eugene Otto and his enchanted doll. Now, it's fair to say that Key West, Florida is well known for being haunted. Now, there are many stories surrounding Key West and the wider states, but one of the most famous is that of Robert the Doll. Now, Eugene Otto, who's an author, by the way, okay, and the elements of a Bohemian voodoo were said to be linked together. Although Robert seems to be nothing but a rather corn-worn doll, dressed in a sailor suit, holding a toy dog covered in small marks that appear to be little scars. With small beady eyes and a smirk on his face, many agree that he is directly responsible for a veritable bounty of woe. Now, Robert has over the years been accused of causing car accidents, relationship breakdowns, divorce, death, disease, and much, much more. Now, you may ask, where did Robert the Doll come from? I'm glad you asked. Now, although Robert's origins are disputed, as this is one of those stories that gets passed around, by word of mouth, right? From family member to family member. Now, it's generally thought that Robert was given to Otto, the author Eugene Otto, as a present from his grandfather following a trip to Germany. Now, after some investigation by the East Martello Museum, where Robert resides to this day, it's now thought that the doll was never actually intended to be a doll. It's thought to have been made of stiff and perhaps to have manufactured or to been manufactured as part of a clown or jester display. But it's thought that Otto, on his own, was given this doll after a nurse had supposedly cursed it. This is what they say. Now, Eugene's full name is Robert Eugene Otto, the author who received this doll. And soon the doll ended up with the name Robert also, while Otto was simply referred to by his middle name. So now in the beginning, Robert the Doll, it was haunted. It was well known for being haunted and for being more than just spooky looking. Like any other childhood friendship between a boy and his toy, this was given to Eugene, but people didn't know what nefarious things had been done before this doll was given away. So anyway, the story goes on to say that Robert the Doll was said to have somewhat of a hold over Eugene. It became violent, and he would become violent and have, outbursts, get angry for no reason. No one would know why he was displaying this behavior. And then things would escalate. Now, stories of Robert the Doll moving meant that he was quickly banished into the attic, because they would say people would walk in the room, the doll would have moved from one place to another. Nobody was in the room previously with the doll, but the doll just wouldn't be where they left it. Some people say they saw the doll floating in the air. And so with all these strange things going on, they put the doll in the attic. Now, if it were up to me, I would have gotten it out of my house and probably burned it, right? But nevertheless, they kept it and they put it in the attic. Now, clearly, in my opinion, attics are very scary places. And the last thing I would want to do is put something scary in the attic, right? So anyway, despite all of this, despite his obvious fear of Robert as a child, Eugene kept the doll. And he kept it as he grew into an adult. Now, he worked as an artist and later married and kept Eugene propped up in a window of his house, or kept the doll Robert propped up in a window of his house. School children and almost anyone walking past the property would say that they often saw the doll disappear right from sight before appearing again right before their very eyes. Now, many people avoided the house entirely so that they could avoid Robert. People were afraid of him and this doll. And you have to ask yourself, why would a grown man have a doll? So clearly the doll had some type of hold on him, if you ask me. Now, Annette, Eugene's wife, was said to be to detest the doll. She really hated it, had an affinity towards it, and supposedly banished it back to the attic. Naturally, he didn't take particularly kind to this, and so Robert, the haunted doll, once more placed demands on Eugene. Now, they say he requested the turret room of the house because he wanted a room with a view of the street. So they're saying the doll told Eugene where he wanted to be in that house, and it wasn't the attic. He said, put me right there in the turret room so I can have a view of the street and see everybody as they walk past and scare them, no less. Now, how crazy does this story sound, right? It clearly sounds crazy. But we do know that there are demons and witchcraft and black magic and all sorts of nefarious things that people do. So anyway, Eugene spent most of his time in the turret room with Robert, painting and talking to the doll. He was literally a grown man talking to a doll. And he did this until he died in 1974. Okay? So the story didn't end with his death. No, because when Robert Eugene Otto, when he died, you see, the doll story continued well past his death, and legend continues even to this day. Now, a woman who brought Eugene's house by the name of Myrtle Reuter was Robert's caretaker following the sale of the house. Reuter corroborated many of Eugene's stories and often found Robert in an entirely different place than where she had initially left him. Now, visitors to her new home didn't like the doll and found that he'd appear and disappear at will. She and her visitors also claimed that the already creepy expression on Robert's face appeared to change when anyone discussed Eugene in a negative way. So that's clearly crazy, okay? This doll clearly had a personality and mind all of its own. And everyone, please, let's get the likes up. Please be sure to get the likes up, okay? So anyway, let me continue. Hold on, people. Okay, here we go. So anyway, in 1994, Myrtle donated the doll to the East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida, where it still resides to this day. So the staff at the museum claimed that Robert has been found in different positions within his case, and that footsteps have been heard around the museum late at night with no apparent explanation for the noise, and that Robert's expression has been known to change in a way from a neutral face to a nasty, menacing face, right, in the blink of an eye. Now, visitors at the museum are given advice on how to approach Robert, to speak to him in a polite way, to ask his permission to photograph him, and to treat him with respect. Can you all believe what you're hearing? Woke when you get freaky with a doll like that. Do you all hear this mess? So they're saying that people have to talk to the doll with respect asked permission to take pictures of it and all of that. I'm going to tell you like this. If I knew that doll was in a museum clearly and it was cursed and all of that and caused all these nefarious things to happen, I wouldn't want to be within 100 feet of it. I.e., I wouldn't be at that museum trying to see it, okay? Clearly crazy. So they say you must talk to it with respect. Now, the walls of Robert's display are littered with letters from visitors apologizing for their behavior when visiting the museum. They claim that they've encountered dreadful misfortune and gotten into accidents, had relationship breakdowns, or even experienced death or disease in their family after visiting to see that doll. And these letters seek to ask his forgiveness. There are over 1,000 letters in total, and the museum keeps and catalogs all of them for future references. Now, how crazy is that? That's clearly crazy, right? Dolls carry spirits from place to place. Forget going to that museum. Absolutely. And they absolutely do. And let me tell you something. You know, the Amish people who are very religious, right? They don't believe in giving their children dolls. And there's, in fact, a story, a true story, of an English woman who gave one of the Amish children a doll without their permission. And when the child brought the doll home as they were walking home, the parents were so upset. And then after that doll came into the house, all sorts of strange things started happening. And they got rid of the doll, but the strange things still occurred. And they, in fact, had to take the little girl and have an exorcism performed on her. Because they say that a demon was in the doll and it possessed her. I'll have to tell you that story on another day. But let me continue because there's another article on this information about this doll. Now, Thomas and Minnie Otto were an affluent couple who built their home in 1898 in Key West, Florida, now known as the Artist House. They lived there with their 4 beautiful children, Mitzvah, Joseph, Thomas, and little Robert Eugene. The home was quite large, so the Ottos kept a staff of servants to help with maintaining the grounds, the cleaning, the cooking, and looking after the children. Now, the nurse who was caring for the youngest child, Robert, was so integral to the family that they would take her on vacation with them so she could assist with the boy while they traveled abroad. Life was good for the Ottos. The nurse, on the other hand, was quite unhappy. There are 2 conflicting accounts of how Robert Eugene acquired the doll. Now, some say that it was handmade, a kind of doll from a kind doll that his grandfather brought back from Germany. Others say that it was a gift from his nurse. Now, Robert's nurse, like many of the staff the Ottos employed, is said to have been from Jamaica, though there is some debate that the woman was actually Haitian. Now, unfortunately, given the time and place in history, there are no recordings of the nurse's name. So her origin and family history is based on stories that have been passed down by the Otto family and Key West locals that live nearby. So as the story goes, this nurse practiced voodoo, and displeased with the way the Otto family treated her and other servants, decided to take her revenge in only a way that she knew. When Robert was 4 years old, she gave him a gift. It was a handmade doll in the boy's likeness and imbibed with the essence of a demon's spirits. Now, the boy was absolutely enamored with his inanimate friend and immediately named it Robert, giving it his own first name and having everyone refer to him as Gene by his middle name. Now, the doll itself stood 40 inches tall, which was unusually large for the time. It was stuffed with wood wool, and it was dressed in a sailor suit, which many believe came from Eugene's own wardrobe. Robert the doll's facial features were painted on with a mouth drawn in an expression similar to that of a court jester. Now, from the day Gene got Robert, the 2 were inseparable. Gene brought his new best friend everywhere. Robert slept in Gene's bed, had his own seat at the dinner table with the family, accompanied him during his bath time, and had his own rocking chair in Gene's room. Voodoo or not, the doll absorbed a lot of emotional energy from the boy. It didn't take long for Thomas and Minnie Otto to suspect something was wrong. Now, the problems began with the types of sounds that would come from Jean's room. Minnie would be milling about the house, and she would hear Jean talking to someone, his small voice. And the second voice in the conversation was also Jean's voice, but the tone was frighteningly low and filled with an intensity and an insistence. Now, on one occasion, Minnie crept up to Jean's room to listen into a particular tense-sounding conversation that she heard. Without warning, she burst into the room, unsure of what she would find. And much to her astonishment, she found Jean balled up in a corner of his room with his arms wrapped around his knees, while Robert the doll stared down at him from the bed. As time went on, the Ottos began to hear inexplicable footsteps and giggling from different corners of the house. They would find Jean's other toys ripped to shreds, and when confronted about the mistreatment of things, Jean would always say, "Robert did it." Of course, his parents did not believe him, and so Jean was often punished for random destruction of things in the house, and for the broken dishes in the china cabinet, to the silverware strewn about the floor, to even torn up laundry. Jean's explanation remained constant. He always said, "Robert did it." Now, eventually, the Ottos began shifting the blame to some of the staff for the things that Jean could not possibly have been responsible for, including locking a servant out of the house late at nights. It didn't take long for the servants to become suspicious of Robert the doll themselves. Perhaps one of the most troubling occurrences for the Ottos was waking up one morning to the sound of their little boy screaming in terror. They rushed to his room and found all of his furniture had been overturned and his belongings thrown about the room, all around, everywhere. Robert sat on the bed and appeared to be glaring at Jean while the little boy looked up at his parents and spoke 3 words: "Robert did it." As time passed, visitors and neighbors began to take notice of the doll as well. Visitors claimed to see Robert blink, and they heard the mysterious footsteps when he was not in view. Neighbors claimed to see Robert peeking through windows, appearing to move on his own. Now, when Jean's aunt came to visit, she was immediately uncomfortable with Robert. She believed that the doll was indeed cursed and insisted that Thomas get rid of it. Not wanting to break his son's heart, Thomas took Robert, placed him in a box, and brought the doll up into the attic, where he would stay until the end of the aunt's visit. Now, sadly, the woman was found dead in her bedroom the next morning. The official cause of death was a stroke. The doll probably scared her to death, people. But Robert the doll was quickly unboxed and returned to Jean, never to leave his side again. Now, I don't know about you all, but I would have clearly thought that was suspicious. The woman that wants the doll done away with is now found dead the next day, and they're going to give him back the doll? I would have burned it, okay? Clearly. So Jean grew up to be an artist. He designed the gallery at the Fort East Martello Museum and married a renowned pianist named Annette Parker. Now, he brought her to live in his childhood home where she first met Robert the doll. Jean was known to be an eccentric character. It was part of his claim and part of his charm. So Annette did not make a fuss about the doll right away because she thought, oh, he's eccentric. You know, he's just one of those people who dabble in things, or they just want to be, so extra. Now, so with that all being said, over time, however, she grew tired of Robert the doll, and it began to take a toll on their relationship. Once again, Robert had a seat at the dinner table and a chair by Jean's side of their marital bed. She grew to detest the doll and insisted that he get rid of it. Now, this all sounds crazy. What grown man would have a doll in the bed with him and sitting at the dinner table? Like his father had done many years before, Jean took Robert, placed him in a box, and brought him up to the attic. This only served to unnerve Annette further. Jean and Annette would hear footsteps in the attic and giggling throughout the house until one day they entered the sitting room to find Robert sitting in a rocking chair. Robert the doll stayed with Gene until the day he died in 1974. Annette passed away 2 years later, but the story doesn't end there. Myrtle Reuter purchased the Otto house after Annette's death in 1974, and she found Robert the doll and thought him to be an interesting antique. She soon realized that Robert was more interesting than she had initially thought. Visitors who would come to her home claimed to hear footsteps in the attic. In one case, a plumber reported that he heard giggling coming from behind him, like right over his shoulder. Can you imagine the shock? Why would she marry this crazy? Because exactly, it is crazy, but they said she thought he was eccentric. So she just, overlooked it in the beginning. Because, eccentric people, they do weird things, okay? They do things that most of us would think are strange. So, nevertheless, the plumber said that he heard someone giggling from behind him, like they were leaning over his shoulder. And when he turned to see what was going on, he said the doll had moved across the room on its own. Myrtle was convinced that the doll was haunted, and both her and her daughter insisted that Robert moved around the house by himself, unassisted. Now, the artist's house was gaining its popularity. The locals were fascinated by the story of the demon doll. This is how you know some people are crazy. Okay, the Helmets crew, why would they want to go see this doll? A demon doll is the last thing I would ever want to go see. But they flocked to the house because they had to get a glimpse. Now, so a reporter named Malcolm Ross came by to do a story on him. When he was brought into Robert's room, Malcolm was stunned to see a change in the doll's facial expression. Malcolm had been talking negatively about Gene Otto, and Robert appeared to glare at him in disgust. He says, it was like a metal bar running down my back. At first, when we walked through the door, the look on his face was like a little boy being punished. It was as if he was asking himself, who are these people in my room, and what are they going to do to me? So that's also crazy, but that's the story of Robert the doll, and that is where they got the idea for the movie Child's Play, with a wicked doll, demon-possessed also, named Chucky. Okay? So they want the evil's power. Sounds like the parents knew of the doll's power and desired to have it around. This is an episode of The Twilight Zone, says Carl Kilcrease. Absolutely crazy, right? Designer Junkie says, teach queen. Thank you, beloved. Okay? So with that all being said, I want to thank you all for tuning in once again to Queen Ahmadiyyah TV Presents Beyond the Realm. I'm going to be going live in a few minutes. Actually, as soon as I conclude this broadcast, I'm going to be going live on my other channel, Queen Ahmadiyyah TV Presents The Root of All Evil. I have a juicy story of murder for hire. So I'm going to be talking about that. So please make sure that you tune in. I want to thank you all for tuning in once again. Please like and share the video. Subscribe to the channel if you have not done so. Be sure to click the notification bell and click the word all. And if you have noticed that you have not been receiving notifications, please double check and make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. Don't forget to follow the Queen on Instagram at Queen Ahmadiyyah Also on Instagram at divine_goddess_27. On Twitter at dgoddess27. And on Brighton and Patreon at Queen Ahmadiyyah. Until next time, family, I will talk to you all again soon.